Hello and welcome to this week's review of My Hero Academia Vigilantes, the anime series, and this week we're reviewing the episode titled Glass Sky, and we kick off this review as we always do with these reviews by talking about the positives and the headline positives, the big things I'll be discussing over the course of this review. I enjoyed how wild some of the character designs were in this episode, I liked Eraserhead's arc throughout this episode, and I liked how much they were able to adapt for this particular episode. I know that one feels very, very hyper-technical, but we'll discuss that as we go forward. First of all, just say thank you to people that have subscribed and liked previous videos. We've now finally hit 170 subscribers. Would be nice to hit 200 by the end of the year, but we'll see where we go with that. And secondly, for whatever reason, somehow I've strained my voice again, so if I'm not as animated as I usually am in some of these videos, that's the reason why. But with all that said and done, let's get into the review itself and say that I enjoyed just how wild and bonkers some of the character designs are in this episode. For those who might not be aware of these reviews that I do in this channel, I have read the manga and I've read up through to this point in the manga, so I knew these character designs were coming. But even still, it's just so wild that the big villain for this episode is a nicotine-addicted Majin Buu, and that the mentor figure is Prince, the singer from the 1980s, mixed with some guy out of JoJo that I don't know. It's just this wild combination of just random stuff that I just find just so cool. The fact that this is even happening with this series is something that I do like. Vigilantes as a series, in the manga series and even into this animated version of it, is willing to just go, you know what, let's just do it, let's just go nuts, let's just go crazy. Yet some things have been tweaked from the manga to the anime version, some character designs have been done differently, but even still, the fact that we have Prince but mixed with something out of JoJo and Nicotine Majin Buu, and they actually went ahead and did it with both of these, is fantastic. I'm tempted to go back and rewatch this one with the English language voice actor, because I want to see what the English voice actor did for legally different mix of Prince and JoJo character, because that's something I'm really looking forward to. I mean, wow, it's just so wow that this is even where they are, because this Vigilantes is a series, to its credit, in the manga and in this, where it is just willing to just go nuts with quirks and their abilities and the character designs in a way the main series didn't, certainly not towards the end of it, where it felt as though the just sheer wild creativity of quirks got boiled down to what looked cool as far as the action sequence or drama on screen was concerned. But nonetheless, this is an episode which features some great character designs. Even beyond the more eccentric stuff, we get to see more of Oboro and his hero costume, which is very much this cross between an aviator and Sun Wukong, which makes sense given that he has a cloud power, which is sure, I mean, it works and it's effective. We see him smack the hell out of the Nicotine Majin Buu with just one great big thwack in a way which, bloody hell, I mean, that'll kill a guy. So yeah, it's a good thing it seems to be made of sterner stuff, but hey, some of that sterner stuff might just be powered up by just sheer force of smoke. That entire first act of the episode, this is an episode that's Prince in it, and Nicotine Majin Buu. This is where we are. It's wild when you think about it, that only a few weeks ago we were dealing with the end of My Hero Academia and all the big dramatic seriousness of that, and now here we are with Nicotine Majin Buu and Prince. Alright, Prince mixed with characters from JoJo, I don't know because I don't know JoJo, but still, all the same, this is an episode that just... And it's helped by the fact the action sequences in this episode are good as well. So you got these really wild and interesting character designs being used in ways that don't feel like their character design is hindering the animation. Because you can often get this situation where character designs are just so complex and just so busy that when it comes to actually animating them in action sequences, or even just in anything, it feels as though the animation suffers because they're having to put this much detail into stuff, or alternatively, when they're adapted from one source to another, they're having to cut away some of these details in order to make it work. And I'll grant you the character designs of a lot of the cast in this episode aren't that much different from their manga versions of it. It's still good to see there's nothing here that's holding us back, that you can have some great action sequences like we see towards the end of the episode where Eraserhead and the rest of them confront, well, it's really Eraserhead and Oboro confront the big, I suppose, store brand version of Bakugo mixed with that one guy from Zelda Skyward Sword that everyone memes on. And it all works. It all works spectacularly well. Well, not spectacular. It works very well. I'm not going to say this is a spectacular, great, or fantastic episode. It does have the feeling of being connecting tissue, especially given what's coming next week. But nonetheless, this is an episode that gives us a sense of where these characters are at this moment in their life. This is for them just another episode in their life. This is just another period in their life, period in this history. Granted, given in this version of it, it's spread over a longer time because the stuff with them meeting up again to have this big fight towards the end of this episode takes place to a term later or so, which is hell of a time skip, but nonetheless, it's a well done one nonetheless. It does read us into an action sequence, which is fun, and I still love the fact that President Mike gets dragged into this rivalry thing between the guy that he's been doing a work study with and Oboro and Eraserhead, just because he's really butthurt about the fact that they've copied his look by the fact that they've got something else that protects their eyes. I suppose he hasn't got a problem with that one girl that has the monocle on because it only protects one of her eyes but not two of them. And it's also the fact of he effectively says, I don't know why I'm mad, but I'm going to fight you anyway because you're wearing glasses. Or whatever the hell it is. He says it in such a way so it ends up feeling like, even in the episode, they're acknowledging the fact that this fight's a little bit tenuous for happening, but nonetheless it happens. And I will just say is that, given just how this episode is constructed, it makes this confrontation moment feel a lot better than in the manga. Not spectacularly better, but I will just say that in the manga it did feel like a case of, okay, you've got these characters confronting their school bully. This feels like it should be a bigger moment than it is. And whilst it isn't necessarily a bigger moment here, it's still done in a way where it does feel like, okay, they're drawing a line under this, or at least this is a moment in their lives where they're going to say, we got one over him, and he's going to remember this forever. Which is something I do like, and how this has ended up washing out. That he has a solid action sequence connected to it, where the characters are able to do their thing, minus President Mike, because he's just staying out of this because he doesn't want to upset anybody. And this, of course, then pivots into what we get towards the end of this episode. I like how Eraserhead's arc is done in this episode. It is solid and developed enough to make this episode compelling, but not done in such a way that it feels like all his problems and all his issues are solved, or that his solution to these problems is so far away from where he is that it almost feels pointless, if you understand what I'm meaning. When it comes to moments like this in stories where it's a case of him trying to find a way to smile when he does the hero work, he doesn't. He tries his best, but he doesn't. He needs to find a way in being confident with himself. He is struggling with the idea of being part of a group, being part of a collective, but there's still a part of him that wants to do that does like that, and does like the idea of that, even if the more introverted part of his personality just doesn't want that. He wants to be a lone entity, he wants to be disconnected from everyone else, and it's all stuff that feels as though it does have, within the context of this story, room to grow, but at the same time, over the course of this episode, it does feel as though the character is evolving in such a way that it feels as though this episode had more of a point to it than just being connecting tissue. That we are seeing him in his own way, starting to come into more of his own and believe more in himself and his abilities. He's not quite there yet. He's not at the point where he can confidently say that he's a hero and he can handle being in close combat. We're not at a point where he deep down feels like he can be like the Eraserhead that we even see at the start of the main series. He has a long way to go to that, but at least in this episode, we see him growing in such a way that it makes the episode, for me, feel a lot more concrete. It feels as though there's more here than it just being, here's the bit between when we learn about these characters and the sad stuff coming next week. And the final point of praise, and I do understand this is going to be a short review, but like I say, I'm not feeling well at the moment, is that I like how this episode, they adapted this episode. This doesn't radically change what happens in the manga, I have to say that. And whilst that's not a point that I often draw from, it is still something I am wary of, particularly given the current state of things, and how this is a story arc which is happening in the anime before it happens in the manga. And knowing ultimately where all this is going, and knowing the kind of stuff we're going to see next, bearing in mind that this is pretty much where my reviews of the manga ended before we got into the final season of My Hero Academia, there was a part of me that came to this point which was thinking, okay, are they just going to do these like couple of episodes, these couple of chapters from the manga, or are they also going to start building into next week's episode? Are they going to start doing that now? Thankfully that isn't the case, because we get again something that feels fairly feature complete. Not as much as I think it should do, and we'll get onto that in a moment, but certainly in a way where it does feel as though this is a complete entity. That this is not two very different episodes being smashed together to create a whole for the anime. That this is giving us enough of an insight into these characters, into Eraserhead's development at this point in his time, at this point in his life, whilst at the same time leaving stuff open for the coming episodes and for stuff that will happen off screen for the rest of his life until we see him in the main series and in this series. And this is an episode that adapts enough to make this episode feel complete enough. I know this shouldn't be as much of a bugbear for me as it is, but I hate the thing in anime where it feels as though they have adapted two very different episodes with two very different pacings and different tones and put them together. I hate that because it just makes the episode feel disconnected. And it could easily have been a case that this week you do all the stuff with them defeating Nicotine Marching Boo and meeting Not Prince and having to fight with the bully and the bit on the roof, and then immediately getting into the darker stuff for next week, this week, but only doing a portion of it to then repeat that next week to then get into that stuff next week in greater detail. And I'm glad that isn't the case. I'm really glad that isn't the case. So what we get here is a nice, feature-complete, enjoyable episode with plenty to enjoy. Like, it's... I apologise that I can't really talk about these episodes in greater detail. A, like I say, because I'm not feeling that well, and B, because this is stuff that I've seen in the manga, so it's harder to me to talk about it in greater detail, because I am effectively seeing this stuff for a second time. But still, this is still a very strong episode, but with that said, I will get into the negatives and say that while I have mixed feelings about this one from a certain point of view, is that on the one hand, like I say, I think this episode is feature complete enough to be an episode, to be the connecting tissue episode between two major points in this story. That this has enough within it to keep you going and keep you talking about these characters, but at the same time, it still doesn't feel as feature complete as it should be. Whilst I am willing to say that I think that this episode does a better job with the whole confronting the bully moment than the manga does, it still feels like something that should be more of a moment. That maybe that fight should have gone on for longer, or that there should have been more of an emotional stake in this. Because this guy just feels like a bit of an annoying prick, a bit of a loudmouth, and that's about it, even though they are presented in a way which makes them feel like the school bully. The whole thing about the teacher, the hero teacher, praising Eraserhead, it's something that they do pick up on in the episode and say, ah, hey, Mr. What's-His-Face is giving you praise, is that great, Aizawa? Again, that feels like something that should be more of a moment rather than just a walk-away gag. Like, it's elements of here that feel as though they should be made better or made bigger. I mean, you don't even need to extend the fight sequence or do anything any more with it than it already has done, but you still could have done a thing of making the emotional stakes of this higher. You didn't need to go to the extent of saying, oh, but if someone doesn't win their fight, they're going to get thrown off the course, or any of the nonsense that we had repeatedly in the main series. But at the very least, you still need to have a situation where it feels as though there's more of an emotional payoff to what we're seeing here. Even if it isn't major, even if this itself is not a life-defining moment, I still think it needed something that makes you go, okay, this is the moment where they can say, in their own way, the bully is leaving them alone. Or that Eraserhead got that praise from the teacher that made him feel a little bit more secure in himself. Or that Eraserhead learnt that thing that would end up helping him for the rest of his career. In this episode, the closest that we get to that is him realising, oh, maybe I should wear goggles to protect my eyes. And even the whole fact of the matter that he's borrowing his friend's goggles. A close friend, the friend that has effectively adopted him, the friend that is adopted him in the way that Eraserhead tried to adopt the stray cat, that doesn't really feel as though it's built out even as where it should be emotionally. Like, it feels like it should be more of an emotional thing. We know in hindsight why it's an emotional moment. We know the significance of the goggles that he wears in the present and in the main series, but at this moment, him getting those goggles just feels like an incidental thing. It feels like him just getting them because they're just an item, they're just an aspect of the costume. Which on the one hand doesn't work, but on the other hand it also does work, because in that moment Eraserhead wouldn't know the emotional significance of it. He wouldn't know that, oh, in a matter of weeks' time this horrible thing's going to happen that you're going to have to deal with, and now this thing that you've been given is going to have a greater emotional significance. Right, I understand that, and treating it as more, this is just part of his life and he doesn't realise it more until later after the fact. I understand that, but we aren't seeing this live, so to speak. We're seeing this as a flashback. And in the context of a flashback, it feels as though there should be at least a hint of something more emotive here as far as passing those goggles on. We'll see where it ends up going, because like I've said previously, this is... Actually, you know what, let's get into the overview and then I'll say this bit. Into the overview, I think this is a strong episode and I like how it's adapted. It feels as though it is missing something and I'm not 100% sure what that is. Maybe more of an emotional moment to tie this all together. Maybe something else needed to happen. I'm not 100% sure. But like I say, this is the... As far as I read in the manga, I did read what I suppose would be the first half of the next week's episode, because I didn't know when Vigilantes was coming back, so I decided, okay, I'll read a few ahead of time, I'll get stuff pre-recorded so I'm not having to scramble through the week to do these reviews, and then, oh, My Hero Academia Vigilantes is coming back in a couple of weeks. Oh, I'm not going to have time to do this then. Oh, okay, so from this point on, the review should get a lot more animated, because this will be stuff that I haven't seen, at least for the next couple episodes or so, and then we'll go back to the Sky Egg stuff, but hey, at least then my throat won't be hurting quite as much. Well, let's end on however, it's time for Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner. I'll try and do this as cut as I can do, because it feels so we're on the edge of what I can do today, vocally speaking. Big X1 is left a comment in the previous video saying, looking forward to this one. This, of course, referring to this week's episode, Glass Sky. But I think it might be the highlight of the season, maybe not in a good way in the end. Thank you for your comment, and we'll see where we go with this one. I think it's weird to do this as doing it where it is rather than doing it at the end, because I think it would have made for a more emotional ending than what we're going to get. That's not to say what we're going to get instead of that for the end of the series isn't going to be any good, but it feels weird. It feels weird, man, but I suppose that they want to keep some kind of emotional continuity with how it all ended last season. Nonetheless, let me all know what you thought about this particular episode down in the comment section down below. Sorry if this one's been a little bit unfocused or waffly, but like I say, I'm coming down with something right now, and it's making it hard to concentrate and it's making it hard to talk. Nonetheless, thank you all for listening, thank you for watching, be sure to like, favourite, subscribe. See you next time, thank you, and goodbye! Thanks for watching, be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!